Open this in another tab over here so we know this. All right. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome everyone to this say one-on-one session with Aastha Chawla. Aastha, welcome to the session and thank you for taking the time out.
Of course,
Open
Rajat, excited to be here.
the tab. All right. So uh, in this session, we're going to talk about a few things. One is, how did so primarily it's going to be how did you create this pathway of success to Kellogg, and then we're going to talk briefly about your experience at Kellogg for during these 6 months or so that you've had over there. Um, just in general, the format of the session, it's going to be about 40 to 50 minutes, the entire Q&A, and then we'll reserve about 10 minutes towards the end for questions. So if you guys have questions, reserve them towards the end. That way, they don't get lost. If you ask questions early on, they might get lost in the chat. So
Right.
with that, let's get started, Aastha. We'll start with right from the very beginning for you, and let's spend about 10 minutes on the GMAT. So you started with a score of 640, you went to that 730. What are some of the challenges you faced with regards to getting to that score of 730, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So I started with 640 with a lot of confidence before that, as in I had given CAT in India. I had given all these competitive exams and I felt confident that GMAT was going to be fairly easier given that CAT is just
Hmm.
way too difficult on certain aspects. So I would say the confidence was high. I was okay in doing in attempting the mocks at home before I gave my first attempt, but the first score really reflected how different GMAT is and why this is so important to have a different approach towards it. So I've written in length about each of my attempts and how I reached the score of 730. I think we also had a discussion a few months back, and I think there's a link in the chat box as well of my debrief on GMAT Club. But the three things that really stood out for me as a very high level takeaway, if I think about it now, is I identified that between quant and verbal. Verbal was the area I really needed to
Hmm.
focus on, and which was the one having the most variations within my successive attempts. But verbal, again, is a very big section in its own. So identifying which section within it was a problem, and also within that, which topic was I struggling with. So just to have a very brief overview of that, I would say that having a quantitative approach and setting targets for yourself, like we do for any other target, if you want to achieve, really helped. So I had taken e-GMAT right from the beginning. So I had that data right from the start. So going into Scholarinium, identifying which area within a particular topic I was not doing well at. And then going back to application files and attempting more questions from that, really zeroing in on my weakness
Hmm.
helped me a lot. The second thing that came out big for as a weakness in my attempts and also in my preparation strategy was I attempted my initial few exams like an objective test, not like an adaptive test, which means that I was giving each question equal amount of time and equal weightage. But
Hmm.
it takes prioritization and a long-term view of exam to sometimes let go of the question at hand, decide that okay, this will just maybe if I get it right, it will not help in the bigger picture of the exam.
Lose the battle, win the war.
Yes. So managing that time, doing the reps, and in fact, judging yourself on was my decision to leave that question helpful because it gives you the confidence to do that in the real exam as well. So start doing it in your practice when you are doing timed exams. If it's okay to leave a question to ensure that you have good accuracy on the overall exam and then come back to the questions you did not do right instead of giving it everything you have at that time. And the third thing, which was big for me as well, was mental stress. I was in a good mental balance state when I was attempting questions at home, but things get different at the exam center. You get curveballs. You if you're doing well, especially you do get difficult questions. And sometimes when you're just anxious, even the first verbal question might throw you off the bat. So the key is to not lose confidence at that time and have that kind of confidence in your preparation and give it give yourself time to attempt initial few questions, because I think it is important to get first few right, but not think about the previous question when you're on the current question. I
I
think
think
that realization really helped me.
what you just said a few minutes ago is very, very important. So I think trust your preparations. I think even before that, you said build milestones. That was the first point, right? Build milestones so you get there, so that you can trust your preparation. Then keep the big picture in mind. You're here to ace the test, not to solve every question. So
Right.
don't get personal with a question. And I know
Oh
all
yeah,
of us
for
do that.
sure.
Like, this isn't my area of my strength. I've got to get this. Doesn't matter anything else. No, that is not it. Everything else matters. It's the question that might not matter. But then
Yeah,
while you're in the exam, don't take stress.
I
Just
agree.
trust your preparation. If you've done that well, then the outcome will be there.
Absolutely. And this was something that got corroborated in my third attempt when I got into my verbal exam 2 minutes late after the fiasco that happened in the break. And I thought that I was getting less than 640, less than my first attempt score, but I got a 710. So
Mm.
just because I thought that it was not going well, I did not give the due diligence and due, what do I
I
say?
remember that
Uh,
conversation now. Now that you mention it, yes.
Yeah, so I've written in length about it in my debrief as well. So the key is to not lose balance and just make sure to make the best use of the remaining time you have as well. Sometimes things will be different in the real exam. So be prepared for that. And it is kind of an emotional quotient you build along the way on how you just take things that happen along the way. There might be a noisy test center. I know, like, these days, GMAT at home is a thing, but sometimes an internet connection might break down. But it's important to just maintain your mental balance and just be focused on your current question and not think about the extraneous things, and just believe in your preparation.
Would you say after all, it's just a test?
Oh, yeah. After all, it's just a test. GMAT is just a data point in your entire application. And I'm happy we'll get to discuss the rest of application stuff as well today.
One other thing. So when you got that 730 score, or when you got that 710 score, so how was the feeling? And when you got that 730 score, eventually, what was the feeling?
730 was liberating in a way, because I was trying to break that 710 mark. I got 710 twice, especially I think the third time I got 710. Instead of being happy that I got 710, I was just so focused on why I extended my break and why everything happened, that I realized later that if I can get 710 with that preparation, in fact, I had targeted 750 or 760. So when I got 730, it was definitely liberating, and it was a wonderful feeling that all the preparation has paid off. But at some time, you also need to realize I wanted to go for another attempt, but I wanted to write a good application as well. So it's important to realize, again, through my experience, if you can take that away, that 730 is actually less than the Kellogg average of 732. But then your application plays a huge role. Your interview plays a huge role in your application set. So don't worry too much, and if you have it in you, go for another attempt, but leave enough time for writing a good application as well.
I agree. I think the score gets you in the consideration pool, but from that consideration pool, whether you come out is your application from there. One other thing that I want to really say is that, if you want to see how Asta felt at that time, watch her debrief, Atul, if you can share that. So let's talk about, we talked about the GMAT piece. Let's talk about your application now. Kellogg is a very interesting application over here, and I'm going to go right into the questions. And what I want you to do is to really say, hey, tell me, what does this question ask? A. Second, what kind of brainstorming did you do as you approached this question? And then how did you respond to this question? And then finally, what do you recommend others? I think that should be a natural outcome. So let's talk about the first question. The first question says, Kellogg's purpose is to educate, equip, and inspire brave leaders who create lasting value. Provide a recent example where you've demonstrated leadership and created value. What challenges did you face, and what did you learn? So let's kind of talk about it. This is a pretty big question. I think it's a very meaty question. I would say what initial brainstorming did you do to get there, and then how did you approach this?
Yeah. So I had a discussion about this a few days back with other applicants as well. And the approach I used that time to explain how I approached this question was to think of my career like we think about career like a timeline. I graduated from my undergrad in 2012. I went to my first company. I did my MBA. I did my second company, and then it's a straight line. But if you really truly reflect about your career, it's definitely not. It's not a straight line according to your experience. Sometimes things are going well. Sometimes things are not going according to you. So it's this curve, and the beauty lies in these curves. I would say that think very deeply about these ups and downs. What was different? What was different about these things? And where do you think your impact was the highest? So the lens I would use to approach this question is, first of all, separate leadership from people leadership. Not everyone would have managed teams.
Yeah,
Leadership,
it is not about reporting responsibilities. I think that part is
yes,
needs to be
it's
clear.
not that for everyone. So uh, separating that is also a key distinction, because we are at 4 or 5 years of average experience when you come into an MBA, and being a people leader is not very common at that level of experience. So, sorry. So think about where you were able to show these leadership qualities, but also what were these nuances that helped you
So I think let's
make
kind
a
of
lasting impact.
what is leadership according to you? Then?
Yes. So yeah, I was going to come to that. So leadership, I would say at Kellogg, especially, what I've come to define as how authentically you are able to represent your story, and how vulnerable are you able to be when you are writing that story. And vulnerability is not about only talking about your areas of improvement, or where you did things right or wrong. It's about what were the real challenges that you faced, when was that, and what was your approach to them, what was your true approach to them, to even identify who would be the right people to take on your project team. So giving that peek into your mindset and your approach really reflects the leadership qualities in you. So I would say, like we talk about any story in star format: situation, task, action, result.
Mhm.
Spend a lot of time in the action bit reflecting on the challenges and what was your approach to it. Give context, build up the task and the situation. But I would say the admissions committee has a lot of experience. They would be able to understand the problem you're facing. What they wanted to see is when you're implementing that idea, when you're making the lasting impact they are talking about. What were the unique challenges that got presented to you, and how was your approach to it? And your approach is the key differentiating factor of your application from others. So spend time on that. Think about which situations came out successfully because of your approach to it. So I used an example of a time where there was this where I was with GSK, and we were in digital transformation of
Yes,
the
yes,
distributor
that
management.
was the line when you were the area sales manager, just for everyone. Yes.
I was in my sales role at GlaxoSmithKline, and I was part of this project of digital transformation of the distributor management system. And I reflected on what role I played from the user side, talking to distributors, getting the sales reps to adopt this solution. These are people who are the sales reps are on the field. They are not very tech savvy, but you are asking them to embrace a new change. So how was your approach to it? How was your communication style different when you were talking to your team members versus when you were talking to sales reps on the field versus when you're talking to internal stakeholders of your adjacent teams? So how you manage these things and what was my approach to it is what I tried to show to the admissions team
Also,
through my
how you
answer.
iterate, right? How you iterate. I think it's just you might not get success in the first go. You might have to iterate, and
Right.
being able to iterate shows that character trait, which is something that B schools look at.
Yep, absolutely. And that's where the challenges come, and then you iterate, you give it another shot, another challenge would come, and then you iterate, and probably this time you hit the home run.
Mm.
So talking about these challenges, how you are good at incorporating feedback, or how you are a good listener to the people who are facing challenges. So these skills are also what a leader is supposed to incorporate.
So when you did this, did you kind of have like other situations that were there in the consideration pool, and then so why did you choose this one in particular?
Yes. So I had like 3 or 4 other stories I was considering, but when I was choosing between them, I was using two lens uh, to identify which one I was going to go with ultimately. The first one was what the level of challenge was
Mhm.
in implementing it, and also how big a role I played in overcoming the challenge
The
instead of
challenge.
the organization or the leadership or my manager played. So, where was I crucial and instrumental in playing that role of overcoming challenge? So, having your own impact and what was the level of challenge was the two key parameters I used to choose the story I was going to go with.
That's really good. I mean, that's thank you for that. I think for me that's a very important point. Why? Because what you've not mentioned in this is to say, hey, what was the impact on the organization? I think, and a lot of people really say, hey, is that a big enough impact on the organization? In some cases, that may be the case. In others, them that might not be. But if you played a big role, if the challenge big enough for you, then that's a great example. Even though the
Right.
impact may be not super huge, it may be medium, but as long as the challenge big for you and it gets those character traits out, because otherwise you would not have those traits come out.
Yes.
So I've seen a bunch of questions come in. We will take those questions and we have reserved some time towards the end. Now, I want to ask this couple of questions more around this. So um, and again, forgive me, I don't remember the timeline around this, but this seems like a lot of work when you did this deliberation, where you applied the STAR framework. So how long did it take for you to kind of arrive at that? Out of the 3 or 4 situations you're going to you could actually mention, or you could actually talk about, this is the one that you're going to take. So how long did it take to do that step one? How long did it take for you to then bulletize this out? And then how long was the actual writing time for this essay? If you can divide that piece.
Yeah. So I think I thought about the first essay for around 1 week before I decided which story I was going to take. And then the writing bit and editing it to within word limit, iterating on it to have the most impactful story took around 1.5 months.
Hmm.
So I would say all in all, from end to end, it took me around 2 months to
Let's kind of go
do.
take a step back. 1 week, you've narrowed down the situation. When was the first draft ready after that? Which may not
Yes.
adhere,
So
which might not have adhered to the word limit, but it was good enough where you said, I'm on the right path.
right. Yes. So 1 week I thought about it. The next time was identifying which aspects of my experience would I put into the story, because it's you have to summarize an experience of 6 months into 500 words. So which aspects am I going to zero in on, and
Mhm.
what am I going to talk about? So having that starl format really helped. I think it's a fairly common format. So I wrote it out in that format, but the maximum time after writing the initial starl format was in the action bit, which is the chunk of your story, how you approached the problem. So that's where I realized that I had chosen this story because I wanted to show my impact and also what were the challenges. So I wrote a full length story of what exactly the experience was like. And then I started editing and cutting out pieces which were not serving
So
that aim
how
of,
long was that first draft, if I might interject you there?
yeah, it's been a while. I think the first draft I wrote in about 4 or 5 days, where I just kept writing and
It was
adding to the entire
thousands of
story. So
words.
I'm sorry.
It was probably then 1,000 words or more.
Oh yeah, it was like a mini newspaper article where it's like a full page article. Yeah, it was a pretty long essay, but I did not stop myself in the first time because I wanted to ensure that I'm remembering all the details, because I was also it had been a while when I had done that project. I was writing it after a year or so, so it takes time to remember all the details. And when you're writing, when you're in the flow, you remember more details which are important to that situation. So I wrote out that first draft in around 4 5 days, and then over the period of next 2 weeks, I worked with my admissions consultant. I worked with my friends and family to identify which pieces I can cut out, where else can I add more details to, so that I can talk in further length about my impact and the challenges that I had faced. So that editing and cutting out took around the rest of the time, and until I was within the 500 word limit.
And that's kind of which I think is really important. You didn't really aim for that 500 word limit right from the get go. You aimed to get a good
Oh, yeah.
story out, and that's what allowed you to eventually get that good. The final output was really good. It's like carving. It's like drawing a picture. You just draw an outline. You don't really start coloring the final piece right away. And just make sure the
Right.
outline is right, and then you can color it in. Or in the way I'd say study for the GMAT, where you don't focus on timing right away, but you eventually focus on timing. You've got to get it under those 2 minutes or a minute and a half per question.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I would say that leave time for cutting and editing, because it's most difficult for you to do on your own, because your story is so personal and so important to you. It's when others would read it, you will get many ears, and they will tell you that these 2 lines or these 2, 3 lines do not add any value for me. I understood that you had an impact, and we can cut this out. So leave enough time for editing.
That's a really good point. That the fact that it's so personal to you, that's where you'd face the biggest challenge, getting it down to those words, those 500 words. Okay. Now, did they talk about this during your interview as well? This particular story, was that a topic of discussion?
So as far as I know, Kellogg interviewers do not see any other part of your application. They do have not read your essays. They only have your resume. So
Hmm.
they get a fresh look. You have a good chance to tell your story firsthand in further detail. So they would not have any context. Usually, they come with a framework of questions to ask in the interview. I
Hmm.
think it was fairly predictable, but then it's a very friendly conversation. So it's important to remember that it's still an interview, and you want to kind of talk about your achievements and talk about your values and uh, aspects that set you apart, because it's easy to get carried away in the conversation, because it's actually very, very friendly. It's like a normal conversation you have with a friend.
It's like a conversation we are having.
Yeah, it's almost like this. And sometimes you will give very long answers because you feel that it's a friendly conversation, but then you want to cover more ground as well, because they have to give your feedback on so many points. So be brief in that. Be brief, but be conversational within that interview as well.
Got it. Okay. Did you interview with an admissions officer or with an alumnus?
I interviewed with an alumnus.
Okay. All right. We'll come to that actually. So let's go to the second question. We've spent a good amount of time, but this is really good, valuable insights over here. The second question states that values are what guide you in your life and work. What values are important to you, and how have they influenced you? How did you approach this question once again, and then how did you actually? What was the content of it, and what recommendations would you have for others?
Yeah. This question was the most difficult question for me across my multiple applications, across the various questions that I had come across. And I think I spent 1 month reflecting on what values I want to really f- show through this essay. So I zeroed down on 2 values, but that was a process of, initially I approached it like, what values set me apart, what savvy values I can show, which the admission officers would go like, oh my god, these values are amazing, and these are a wonderful starting point. But when I actually chose the values, it was where I was the most vulnerable, where I showed that why these values truly matter to me. So, like I said, admission officers are reading thousands of applications over the years. So, your value would not surprise them. What will set you apart is the supporting example or your story and your experience that is so totally unique to you, and which resonates with Kellogg's values as well. So, think about your
How do you think
experiences
about
and not
values?
the world.
How do you think about values? Because we don't. I mean, I don't get up in the morning and say, "Man, these are my values. That's how I'm going to act." So,
Yeah.
how do you start thinking about them?
Yes. So, I think the approach to thinking about values is, if you think about your life, what were the biggest challenges, not professional or not only professional, what were the biggest challenges you faced in general? And then the decision you took, what was your guiding light at that time? What was your North Star, and why did that decision feel right to you, and why choosing that, going with that path really helped you stay on that path, because that value was what was with you along the way. So I wrote about the value of family, which is very important to me. And I could have said that, family is important to me. I've always prioritized it. My parents, my larger family doing it. But then that is something we see in every family. A family is composed of love and these relationships. But then I thought about the biggest challenge I had faced in my life up till that point, which was when I was with GSK in 2 or 3 years. I got married in 2018, and then the choice was to continue with GSK and be in India and stay apart from my husband, who was then in US. So the choice was to continue a career or leave behind my career in India and move to US and be sure that I can start again
You
with my
worked very
hard
hard
work.
for that GSK career. You'd put your heart and soul in that GSK career,
Yes.
right? That is why.
And why is that choice so hard is because I have worked so hard to be where I was at GSK. I had a great role. I was a people leader at a fairly young age. Uh, I had it. Another important value for me was always to be very independent and have. I had some career goals ahead of me, which had that piece right into it. The GSK piece fit very well into it, and I had it all planned out. So why at that point, given all that as background, did I choose to move to US and take a career break, but have that belief that I would be able to uh, have a
Get
career, kickstart my career again, use my experience uh, as a springboard to further accelerate, but in the US. It was a leap of faith, but the strength that was, but the value of family gave me the strength to take that decision. And this is the story that I tried to kind of uh, summarize into a short essay. And I think I spoke about two values. Another value was inclusivity, and I had another example from my work I had talked about in that. So
got
think
it.
about the values, think about where you can be authentic and vulnerable and have some experiences to talk about, because values in themselves are great. But then what makes it truly apart is your own dilemmas that you face and how your value helped you take that decision. And think big, raise the stakes there. Think about how the situation was very consequential. So if you have such situations, I would recommend using them as examples.
I think you talked about two things which I want to just reiterate in these two questions. One, while responding to the first question, you said your career is not linear. It goes through these ups and downs. And the second thing that you talked about is essentially the fact that if you've not had challenges, you've not faced a dilemma, and that's kind of where your values come out. So there are these people, about 65, 70 people watching this. And frankly, if your careers have been linear, if you've not faced that dilemma, then I think that's kind of where you probably are not a good candidate to do an MBA yet today. But and because a lot of people really say, is my experience good enough? And I think these are two things where you can really, these are litmus tests for you to say, hey, is your experience good enough um, to even that you'd be a good candidate for Kellogg or Wharton or GSP Chicago or Harvard or Stanford. I mean, if you've not done these things, then and that's kind of a litmus test. Beyond that, then it's how do you compare to others? But so I think that those are two great ways of looking at these things. And thank you for that. So let's talk about the video essay piece right now. And so how did you approach that? What did Kellogg want out of that video essay, by the way?
Yeah, video essay, I remember, like in usually your application, you write your essays, you wrap it up and upload it, kiss it, good luck, and then just be free. But after you are done with application and essay, you have 2 more days to kind of go back and think about the video piece as well. So I know the anxiety that it can cause. In my time, it was a software that they had given, in which you can do multiple practice rounds, and but in the end, you would not know which questions would come up. I'm not sure how it is this year, but I think they have given the questions they would ask. I'm not sure about this, would ask people to verify that. The key here is to still not memorize answers. What they want to see, I think, from the video essay is, of course, your communication skills, but also how you're able to be yourself on video and not just, memorize an essay and say it out loud, because it shows if you've memorized. And in case you stumble somewhere, I think the ability to come back quickly and take control of the situation shows EQ and shows your ability to manage challenges in a real-time situation where time is limited as well.
It's okay to stumble then.
It's definitely okay to stumble. It's definitely okay to take a 5-second break and think about where you want to start again. But it's not okay to give up and just end the video essay there and do something which is like start reading, so that you are just saying something on the video essay.
This is like a full circle with your values that kind of show up over here, and then your ability to take on challenges.
Yeah. So it just shows agility at times, because things will not go exactly the way they're supposed to. The stakes are high. You just have 60 seconds to tell your answer. You want to fit in everything possible. So the idea is of being yourself, being calm, and being able to tell a very short story in that 60 seconds. And I think the question is there for you, but I would still highly recommend, do not memorize answers. Just have a
How do you prepare?
framework.
I think let's talk about that.
So in my application, I think there were 3 questions. The first one was supposed to be around what's your leadership style and something around leadership. So I had thought about what I will talk about in leadership. And I had a framework that these are the 2 or 3 points I will touch. And if by the end of the second point, I will not be able to get to the third point, I will not worry about it and not try to fit it in. I did not memorize. I only had a framework on how I was going to talk about it, because I was not sure what the question was going to be. The second question was I was fairly sure I was going to be asked was why do you want to do the Kellogg 1Y program? And I think this is a question this year as well. So just be clear on what you want to achieve. There can be academic bit to it, there can be a professional bit to it, or there can be the experience bit of it. Identify what you want to talk about and then just talk about it. I talked about what my career goals look like post MBA, and also what I plan to do at Kellogg. I gave myself a kind of a checkpoint at around 30 seconds where I wanted to be sure that within 5 seconds I'm moving on to the next point and I'm quickly wrapping up my previous point. So just having a framework really helped.
But did you also practice before? I mean, would you sit in front of a camera and really just say, these are the questions, this is how I would respond?
Yes, I practiced for a full 1 day. I think we had 2 days deadline to submit the video essay. So for the first day, I practiced a lot on the prompts that were there in the software. So the whole day I was practicing, but then I quickly identified the patterns, the leadership bit, the 1Y Kellogg bit, and then I'm forgetting which else was it, but then the pattern became clear. And then I had a framework, and then I just practiced how I would communicate that framework and fit it into the time frame that was given for me in the video essay.
So just be sensible, have a framework. You don't need to be a YouTube star to ace that essay.
You definitely don't need to be a YouTube star. And I remember I had stumbled a bit in one of my essays, but then I quickly just thought out my framework, took a 1 or 2 second break, and just continued with my story, because you don't need to apologize on video or say sorry and then here I'm going again. Just go with the flow. And I remember reading some comments on GMAT Club as well, where people said that they completely messed up their video essays, where they thought of completely different thing, they said a different thing, they were not happy about it, but they still had an admit. So don't worry about it during the video essay. Just try to communicate the points you've thought out.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. I agree with that. Letters of recommendation. I think I'm looking at the time as well, 34 minutes. So I want to take about another 10 minutes at the most. I want to talk about your experience. So you had a unique challenge. You'd left GSK like what, 6-8 months back before you approached your recommenders again. So how did you approach it? And then Let's just talk about
Yeah.
just how do you approach it.
Yes. So I knew that Kellogg, or I think most schools, are very keen on listening to your recommendation from your manager. So I would say that if you have a good relationship with your manager, or at least with a prior manager, if you're working currently and are not able to ask for a recommendation from a current manager, just try to get a recommendation from a direct manager, at least in your previous role. Have Because they have had the maximum experience of working with you, and their recommendation really talks about your working style. Uh, I remember some people had recommended me to go higher up in the organization and ask the general manager or the MD for a recommendation, so that the the weightage of the recommendation really goes up.
Hmm.
I did not do that. I did not take that advice. I was lucky. My consultant also advised me to not take that recommendation, because a recommendation is an affirmation to your essays, to what you've written in your essays, and it's kind of an affirmation that that's exactly how he or she works.
So
So
when you're really saying, what you're saying is that if this was a challenge for you, it should also be mentioned somewhere in your recommendation that this is one of your achievements.
yes, and probably if the challenge is not there, then your approach should be kind of affirmed through these recommendations, wherein they also talk about how your approach is, how your leadership style is unique, and how you stand out from the rest of the people. So that's and that is something that people who have worked with you can only say. An MD or a GM can write very good things. They can write about your qualities, but they will not have these unique examples because they've not worked directly with you. So if you worked with a very C level, with the leadership a lot, you worked with the C level folks, definitely take the recommendation. Just ask them to include quotes or examples of working examples, rather than just flowery recommendation and flowery praises of how great you are. I think now the admission committee has no doubt that you are great. They are just looking into these examples and real life experiences of how you actually were able to show these great qualities of yours in practice. So people you worked with. So my other was a project leader. The project I talked about in
Okay.
making impact, where I had a lasting impact. I took
The
the
digital transformation
recommendation.
one.
Yes, so I took the recommendation the from the person who had led that project. So he can talk about it in more detail.
Okay, perfect. By the way, we talked about your admission and counseling, and Pooja's asked this question. So, who did you work with? Who helped you with your application? If you
Yeah,
want to.
so for my admission counseling, I worked with a freelancer admission consultant. He was working with Aringo before. I can talk about more details and make an intro if you DM me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. That sounds great. Um, so we've talked about this. One last piece before we go into life at Kellogg. You got scholarship, and you negotiated for that scholarship. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So when I got my admit, I did not get a scholarship with that. And at that time, I had another admit from Carnegie Mellon, Masters in Product Management. So
Hmm.
I kind of had that conversation with the admissions officer and told her about the qualities that I was bringing to the table, what I was planning to do with my time at Kellogg, and how I would be able to add value to my classes with through my experience. But I also spoke to her about my other admits. So if you are able to communicate the real value, or the incremental value that you are bringing to the table from your experiences, and show a great interest, I think it's worth having a discussion. And sometimes they really they listen to you, and they give you a scholarship. So I would say that sometimes people don't pick up that phone call or reach out to the admissions officer. I think it's worth having a discussion. I know a lot of people who did not get a scholarship after that discussion, so it's not a confirmed thing, but it's worth
Yeah, but
discussing.
what do you have to lose? Your admission's not
You
going
won't.
away.
Yes, you have an admission now.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point. So I'm going to add a couple of things given what I know from other students. So we had this guy, Krishnakant, and he actually got three full scholarships, three full rides, And then I think it was Georgetown where he had a 50% scholarship. And so he did the same thing. He actually talked about what you said. He said, have these other options. They're great, but I really want to go here. If I remember, it was Georgetown. I might be wrong over there. But then he also sent the link to his GMAT club debrief. And he said, look, I've impacted so many people, just as an evidence of the qualities that he brings about. And within 24 hours, they increased that 50% to a full ride. And that was incredible. I had not seen that done over there before.
That's really creative.
Yes, it was interesting for me. He actually just recently emailed back and said, hey, he recently got a job offer at Amazon. So this was 2 years ago. But then let's now transition. I think this is a good transition to life at Kellogg. And you are, and we talked about this earlier, you are amongst the most unfortunate MBA students in that regards. And I say it's not a bad way, but I mean, if we were to categorize the fact that, you'd probably have about 70% of, in a 1-year MBA program, but 70% of your entire MBA would be done virtually. Does it feel like a good investment, first of all?
I would not call it an unfortunate year. I would say that the challenges are so unique that you're able to learn in school and then kind of implement it, because it honestly comes down to how you approach it. So I would say the students, and especially this year, the larger community, we came into school knowing that we are going into MBA in a COVID world. So everyone came in with a lot of intention and with very deliberate intention of knowing more people and ensuring that we have a full experience no matter what. And that's where you own your experience comes to life. How you're able to prioritize that this is what I'm going to do given the circumstances really comes out. So doing small group dinners, having pods within the Kellogg larger community really helped us stay in touch with stay in touch during these times, ensuring that we are organizing things in a COVID safe way really helped. So the school has been really agile in terms of having the global hub open for academic activities. With regular testing, we have daily symptom checks, and they have a very detailed contact tracing implemented. And I think they've spoken about it in length on their website as well, so you can go check it out there. But to say that I think the only impacted bit is the larger big group social life, which you would see in the other MBA life. But I think
going to a disco.
yeah, the happy hours, the weekly happy hours, the bigger parties. But I think through this experience, we've formed more meaningful relationships, which I'm sure I'll stay in touch with more people than I would have met once or twice at these big parties. It's about finding new and creative ways where I have a list, like every week I want to know at least 2 or 3 more new people. So that's how I approach it. And I know a lot of people who are approaching it in a similar way or a different way. So like I said, once you've made that decision, you need to kind of be your own customer and decide how you're going to serve your purpose of doing an MBA. And if social life and that networking is very important to you, you make a plan about it like you do for any other aspect. So own your experience and then just go about it in that way.
I can actually add to that, given from your experience, because I got this email from your friend Brynel, right, who was a former e-GMATer, the 2-year MBA student.
I'm not sure.
She said basically she wrote to me yesterday, and I might be
messing up.
Meenal, yes.
Right.
So she wrote to me saying that I'm a former e-GMATer as well. I didn't write to you earlier, but I saw Aastha's interview, and so thank you. It's like you would have made friends from within the 2-year community as well. Otherwise, she wouldn't have written that. Aastha is a very dear friend. So yeah, there's evidence of how you've networked. One other thing which is there is, I mean, the world's global today, and I think one thing that the MBA experience, yes, we talk about the MBA experiences. Hey, you're going to be face to face. You're going to meet these great people. But once you go out in the workforce, you're going to be working virtually with a lot of folks. So this, in a very unique way, prepares you to make those meaningful relationships once you go out in that workforce, because you won't be working just with people in your office. In fact, 50% of the folks who you'll be working with would be virtual. So this training, I think it's very unique to you guys. and you reap benefits from this if you make the most of this. That is.
Oh, absolutely. I think people have made sure that they are adapting to this virtual world, and we have our classmates who are right now in Turkey and China who've not yet been able to be here, but then we try to stay in touch with them. We've learned more about adjusting to timelines more than ever before, and that's how you work with teams. We are doing assignments in groups with them where not everyone is in the same geography, and you adjust, and then it makes you just more open to experiences. And I think I feel I'm more ready for more challenges to come along the way because of this year. So, like I said, I know another year would have been more fun in the conventional sense, but through this experience, I'm more equipped to take on challenges going forward.
That I think that's very well said. So let's talk about this one question which Nirav has put, and it's really relevant. How's the job scenario looking like? And you can talk about it from your own personal situation as well as what you know for about other students at Kellogg and other business schools as well, because you are well networked.
Yeah. So the recruitment scenario, I would say, is definitely impacted if you compare it to last year. But then there are sectors which are doing well compared to last year, and there are sectors which are, I think, waiting and watching to identify what the situation will look like and take that decision closer to our graduation, which is in June. So I don't have the data on it, but my sense is that the on-campus recruiting volume would, in terms of number of companies, I don't think it has been impacted. A lot of companies visited campus, and according to me, which I was very pleasantly surprised to see, even companies which were struggling, they came because they wanted to maintain that relationship with great schools. But I would say the number of people that they usually take was lesser this year, what to compared to last year. Uh, that said, I believe that closer to graduation, we will have many more opportunities when companies would know more. June 2021 is looking like a more positive outlook than what we had previously thought. So, as the situation improves daily with vaccines rolling out, I would say that people are more optimistic about just-in-time recruiting. And in fact, I know of people who have offers, but they are even considering waiting it out because they are confident of more opportunities coming along the way.
And you were talking about Ayush, who was an e-GMATer as well, who recommended e-GMAT to you, by the way.
Yeah,
Is what he told me. And he's gotten a job. He's going to be graduating in June. He's gotten an offer from Amazon. Was it
right.
Amazon?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So some companies which are like thriving and doing great, especially Amazon and other e-commerce firms. Tech is doing amazing, but tech is usually the timelines are closer to graduation unless it's big tech. So I don't have a concern regarding
Yeah, I was going to ask,
people
are you
not
concerned
people
about
graduating without a job. I think people are looking for the job and they are still confident of getting that dream job that they had come in with an aspiration of. So it's just about the shifted timelines. I would not say that there's a risk of lesser employment opportunities.
and we were talking about this earlier. You are seeking a job in the retail sector, right? And that's kind of the worst sector to be in right now, if unless you're online retail, but the actual your regular retail is the worst place, and you still, I mean, you're interviewing for internships even at that, and you're still getting opportunities over there. So which I think is a testament of the quality that Kellogg produces and the quality of students that go in Kellogg. All right, so it's 49. Let's kind of look at a few questions, and I'm going to go from right from the top. I think that's the way we do justice to everyone. Enough opportunities to get into consulting in 1 year MBA. I think just very briefly, Manisha's this question.
Yeah. I think consulting is the same opportunities in terms of summer interns and 1Y MBA, but I do believe that they take more number of interns, and a lot of big companies have internship as a main feeder to their full-time opportunities. But you can, if you have some big three consulting firms, MBB as we call it, as your target, they visit on campus every year, and you would have an opportunity to apply to them
for 1 year as
and
well.
Yes, they come for full time. So 1 year and the second year MBA students are the same for companies. So the students who are in their second year who are recruiting and the 1 year folks who are looking for full time opportunities. All the full time roles would be open for you. And consulting, I think, is not a difficult sector if you're looking for direct full time opportunities.
The other question, I think it's a very, it says, if you're doing the second MBA, is it just the 1 year MBA option, or can you get into 2 years as well?
You can get into 2 year MBA. I know a few folks who are doing their second MBA who have an MBA before, a 2 year MBA from India as well. So you can you have both the options.
And then this one, I think, is a related question. 1 year, would it be advisable for folks who have 7 to 8 years to go for a 1 year MBA, even though they do not? What do you think? I have my opinions on it, but I'd take your opinion. So if you have 7 to 8 years of experience, then would you rather go for a 1 year versus 2 years MBA, even though you may not have business experience?
I think that, okay, so with 7 or 8 years of experience, I think the experience number of years is suited for a 1 year MBA to serve your purpose, because the opportunity cost is less and then you would have the same career opportunities post MBA. But I would say the only lens you would look at for 2 years is that if you're trying to make a big career shift, for example, you are in finance, but you want to go into marketing, that would not be possible in 1 year MBA. You usually are able to change only a few factors. We talk about geography, function, and industry. So if you're trying to change all three, please go for a 2 year MBA, highly recommended. And in your application also, when they ask what are your goals post 1 year MBA, there's a third essay to 1 year MBA application. I think they want to see that what scale of a change you're trying to make. So just be sure that it's not a huge shift, because full-time recruiting is a big commitment from companies, and they are more open to that change if they have an opportunity to work with you with an internship.
So I think the related question, and I completely agree with that. My opinion is the same. I think it's about the extent of change you're trying to make. If you're trying to make a big career change, then the internships do make a difference, a huge difference with regards to this. The second thing which is there is, how much formal business education do you have? Because, if you don't know accounting, if you don't know the basics of econ, if you don't know the basics of finance, if you can't get net present value, if you can't do those pieces over there, you'd still have to learn them, and then you'll have to learn those other things such as strategic options and a bunch of those and data analytics. So you can't cram all of this, do internships, prove your worth if you don't have any background. So that's, I think, the difference between a 1 and a 2 year MBA program. If you have more to learn, if you have more to prove to prospective employers, a 2 year MBA is a better program. In your case, you already had an MBA, you were in sales, you want to go in retail. I think the career shift is not as huge as someone who's a researcher going into marketing or product management over there.
Right. Okay. I think the next question is from Mohak, I see on the screen.
Yes, that's the difference between one. Yeah, I think we talked about it. I don't think there's pros and cons. It's about what you achieve, what you want to achieve through this. Yeah. I think that's what I would really say. There was one other very interesting question that I wanted to show. It was about which job was better, or I think. I think this is 1 year versus 2 year MBA. I think we talked about this. Which one's better? I think we talked about this. So how do you choose between Tepper and Kellogg Admits, and how did you shortlist the schools that you applied to? So I mean, I think this is a very relevant question. So
yes. So since I had a 2 year MBA from India already, I was very sure right from the beginning that I was only going to apply to 1 year programs. Right now I'm looking at retail, but then tech, retail, and intersection of tech was also of great interest to me. So I shortlisted schools based on that. In Tepper, I did not apply to Tepper MBA. I applied to the MS in product management, because that would be a great segue into the tech industry with a degree focused on product management. So I went for MS in product management. I got the admit very early. But if I had not, I was also considering apply to NYU Tech and Cornell Tech MBA. And other than Kellogg 1Y, I was considering Emory 1Y program and probably Notre Dame 1Y program as well. But Kellogg was my dream school. So once I got that admit, I decided to not apply to other programs. And how did you shortlist? Yeah, so one by lens and what was my post MBA goal. This is how I shortlisted.
Just a character trait. Or it was your dream program. You caught in there. You still negotiated for scholarship. It just shows you want to squeeze the most out of it. It's a character trait. It's a really great character trait over there. So I think there's this other question which is very interesting. How did you pitch yourself about the shift from sales to product management?
Yes. So this is a great question, and I would say for any kind of pitch you make from your current role to your dream to your kind of aspirational next role is to see the overlapping skill set. I try to identify what skills are needed for a product manager and what skills do I have in my current role from that. So in a product manager, a lot of it is about listening to your customer and identifying what their needs are and translating it to different internal stakeholders. You talk differently to an engineering team. You talk differently to a PMM team, marketing team, and then you have different KPIs for your other internal leadership team. So I had done that as a sales leader where I had different customer sets. I had to talk to my sales reps for whom I had to break it down to the very basic things. Then I had to talk to my sales executives who had amazing experience, but I had to talk to them in an analytical way so that they can start thinking around numbers. And then I had to talk to my manager where I needed to talk business and talk long term. And then there were other teams within within other adjacent to sales team as well. So how do you see these skills that you've developed in your current role and see that overlap being a leverage for you? So, yes, in your next in your desired role, and use that as a springboard to see that this is what I see leveraging to make an immediate impact. But through this program, I will gain this, this, and this to kind of make up for the gap. So this kind of builds out a whole well-rounded story of how you will make that transition.
It's very well said. It's A plus B is equal to C. A, what you have, B, what you would gain. And then, by the way, that C is bigger than A plus B. So it's 1 plus 1 is 11 kind of piece. And really, really well said. I think a lot of what you've talked about is about introspection. It's like when you're faced with a question, think of it as an opportunity and not really say, oh my God, how the hell will I do this? It's like it's there in you.
Oh, yes.
So which I think is this question is a great one. We've addressed this question, but I think it's a point which is so important that you should emphasize. It's a 5+ years of experience of execution of tasks and almost no managerial experience. Should I consider myself? So I think how should you really address that execution of tasks and no managerial experience piece? So Aastha.
Yes. First of all, as I said in the beginning, managerial experience and leadership experience are very different. You do not need to be a manager to show yourself as a leader. And should you consider yourself for Kellogg, I think you should identify what you want post Kellogg and then see how Kellogg fits in. If it's fitting into that equation, you should definitely consider yourself as a great applicant. Execution of tasks, you've kind of put it into 3 words. I think execution is as hard as strategizing or leading a team. Execution comes with its own set of challenges. So I would encourage you to think about the projects and execution that you've taken, which were the most difficult for you. Did you lead a cross-functional team where one team had different goals from what you were thinking? And getting everyone on the same page, working around time-constrained execution timelines. Where people were on different pages, but you were able to get them on the same page to reframe the situation.
One way to think about it is we'll say, how has your look at what you were doing in year 1, look at what you were doing in year 2, year 3, and it's like, is it just the same thing? Are you responding, if you're saying you're executing tasks, are you responding to the same kind of emails, or has things changed? That changes where the challenge is.
Right. You talk about that growth and just reflect on what experiences are you looking to gain in increment to what you have currently, and then that's your story for Kellogg on why Kellogg and why you're a great candidate for Kellogg.
Yes, and some people might not be, but this introspection will tell them, and that's kind of why we're doing this, which I think is a great segue into another thing. Guys, if you're finding these answers useful, show your appreciation through the like button, and then also we'd be doing more such sessions. So I think if you can post those questions to us, you can write to me, that'd be great. And yes, I think Raghav's question, which is the next one I can show over here, can you get into Ivy Leagues without managerial experience? And the short answer is in a way, yes, right? You can.
Yes. So, like I said, if you are able to showcase your leadership through these projects or through these career transitions you've made, through some challenges you've faced, and talk really about what your approach is, I think uh, Ivy League sounds like a very high reach program in terms of it sounding all exotic. It is very much within your reach if you can showcase your experience into a good story and talk about it with the admissions team.
Okay, and I think I have one last question that I want to really take. I think there are two. One is someone asked this question that, hey, do you need to, should you have worked at a Google, Apple, or they said unicorn, but I think these guys are $1 trillion companies, so we should call them just unicorns. But I think the key question really is, does pedigree matter with regards to your alma mater or where you worked, and to what extent? I think it's a really important piece. And you're a classic example. I mean, you are not from an IIT, you're from Manipal. And so is
Thank
Ayush.
you.
Both of you are, and so is Satya Nadella, by the way. So and then you've not worked at a Google or an Apple, and Ayush has gotten into Columbia, you've gotten into this, and I'm sure you know other people. So again, those things are not mandatory. Given we've talked about anecdotal examples, but the push from having someone who's graduated from IIT just matters. Probably adds about 2% to it, but your work ex, I think, is kind of the big chunk over there.
Yes. So I think if you are from a big company, from the top 3 companies, the beauty of Kellogg is in getting people from diverse backgrounds, talking about challenges of working at a big company, but also know about challenges of working as an entrepreneur. For example, you dropped out of college and you started your own company. I think we would be very willing to listen to your story as well, in addition to someone's story from Google or any other big company. And if after IIT you've done projects, but you do not have much impact, but as from another school, you had some great opportunities to work. So it's about highlighting your own achievements. But first of all, I always say that approach it with things you can control. You can control your narrative. You've done a good undergrad now, whether it was IIT or another school, it's done. And you are doing great right now based on what you've done in the past. So own that story and use it as a leverage to achieve great things after that. I would not worry about what's done in the past. I think you are here considering a big leap into an MBA, into a new geography, and you believe you're ready for this challenge. So that shows that you've achieved a lot in the past, that you are thinking of taking this next big step. So just reflect on your experiences, on what sets you apart from other folks. So don't go behind what the ranking of your school was. I think every challenge is worth an attempt. So I always encourage people to go for that attempt. Not worry about these rankings.
I want to add to a conversation now that I'm thinking about. I had with the dean of Stanford's dean when we visited Stanford, I think in 2017, 2018. And what she said is, we've people from Google, Apple, and Microsoft and Amazon. What I'm looking for is that guy whose parents actually couldn't support him, and he supported his own undergrad and his own high school education by working those odd jobs. And that's the kind of guy who I would just take in, because that's where, when you talk about diversity, he's the one who's going to add to my class's experience.
Absolutely. And also, like, talking about big companies, when you come here at school, you would see that not everyone wants to go into these top 3 companies. People are seeking a variety of experiences. For an example, I want to go into a medium scale company, ideally where I can get exposure to the company's leadership, as opposed to maybe a bigger company, which would also be great, but then it comes at its own opportunity cost. So not everybody would want to go into the top 3 companies, and hence not everybody would come from these big companies. So I think every experience comes with its own set of things. So the beauty is in the diversity of it.
So can you talk about the Kellogg MBA program? I have a couple of people. So is that something that we didn't talk about this earlier, but yes.
Yeah, I don't know much about it. I know that it's focused on AI, and it's the incoming cohort would be the first one to go for it. They have collaborated with faculties from engineering school and the design school as well. I'm sorry, I would not have much information on it, but I think they've written a lot about it on the website, and that's all my information on this course as well.
Okay, and I think that's a good way. Well, one thing I would say, knowing Kellogg and knowing how they execute, they probably do a great job executing on that as well.
Yes, and they have a great alumni net base in these tech companies where you will get good mentorship opportunities, according to me, and good post MBA careers in that sector.
So I think then this question is a perfect one, and then we'll do the last question, and then so what roles do alums play when it comes to nurturing the applying candidate and placements?
So placements is all very dicey to say. Sometimes these things work out, sometimes they don't. Usually, if something works out, it would be closer to graduation because these alums would be a part of bigger companies most of the times, which have a defined placement procedure or a recruiting procedure. But what role do these alums play when it comes to nurturing the applying candidate? Do you mean like the applicants, or when it's in the school, when we are in school?
Well, let's talk about when we are in school. I think do they actually reach out to them when you have questions and do they respond back?
Yeah. So I remember when I got the admit from Kellogg, within 1 week, I got an email from a pretty senior alum, and I'm in touch with him regularly. So he's like my buddy, and I always seek career advice and guidance from him. But in addition to that, Kellogg has a great alumni directory and alumni base. You were always available to answer, and they usually answer back when you reach out to them. There's also a program, industry advisors, where you decide which industry you want to go to, and then there are 3 or 4 alums who you can just book a session with, and they are ready to chat with you to share their experiences. Recently, also we got email on you can sign up for a mentor as a former Kellogg alum as a graduating student as well. So we, as current students, can sign up for another mentor going forward. So there are enough resources in place to get guidance and be in touch with alums. And I think it plays a good role in giving you perspective and making the best use of your time at Kellogg based on their experience as well.
Okay. With that, the last question for the day, I think this was a good question to end on. It's like, hey, as a fresher, what would you do now if you were a fresher? Or if for Rahul in that case?
Would I? And I did not get the question.
This guy who wants to do an MBA 4 or 5 years from now. So what should he? How should he chart his course over the next 4 to 5 years,
Okay.
So that he's a good candidate for Kellogg?
Yeah. So I would say that look for opportunities to grow yourself, and I think it's very important to take on challenges which might seem a bit of a stretch, because they would expose you to challenges which you can then talk about. But that's a very application focused answer. I think when you go through these challenges and then when you come to school, after those challenges, you can really relate to the things you're studying at school in terms of real life experiences you've gone through. I still remember my previous MBA. I could relate to some, but the way I relate to the courses now, especially leadership courses, because I've been a people leader or in general done some projects, I think I can really I can visualize the challenges and ask those deep questions to the professors also, the answers to which are really applicable to my journey, and I could see using those answers in my journey ahead. So challenge yourself, go out of your comfort zone, expose yourself to real world challenges so that you can see some answers, or at least make yourself more educated about how to approach these challenges when you come to an MBA.
Yeah, that's true. That's very well said. I think there's no one right answer to it. I think the one wrong answer to it is don't get comfortable. I mean, if you get comfortable, you will not be a good candidate for Kellogg.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So as long as you take on challenges, it doesn't matter which company you work for. It doesn't matter whether you've succeeded. I mean, you eventually will if you're iterating. But if you don't take challenges, then I think that's a problem.
Yep. Your bruises are your awards and your badge of honor. So just gain those bruises right now.
Yeah. Don't get tattoos, get bruises.
Yes.
So Is there anyone from India who's applied in round 3 and secured admission at Kellogg? I know admission at other schools, people from India, where they've actually not just secured admissions, but also scholarships. Do you know of anyone at Kellogg?
I know of someone who was in the US already. I think the reason they don't give out admits to many internationals in round 3 is they're concerned whether they will be able to make it in time with visa. So if you are in US already, round 3 is still a reach. But I would recommend that, being from India, we are still an overrepresented geography. Would recommend to apply early in round 1 and 2.
I agree with that. I mean, they will give you if you're an excellent candidate, even if you have an excellent GMAT score. In fact, Krishna's case is such: 680 round 2 didn't get a single admit, 720 round 3 got 5 full scholarships, and I have a few other examples over there. Now, not for Kellogg, but for other schools, as I said. I think they have to give admission. That's just where do you stand against the applicant pool versus how many seats do you have? I think there's one slight advantage that you have is that the smarter people also apply in round 1 and round 2, because that's the norm. So there aren't very many excellent candidates in round 3. That I have that hypothesis from my side. Okay, I think that's about it. I want to thank you, Aastha, for taking the time out. It was incredible. Thank you for your insightful answers. I want to thank our audiences for joining us today and for those insightful questions over there. And if you have more questions, I think we've shared Aastha's LinkedIn. You can reach out to her. Just don't bombard her and expect an answer within a day. She's also interviewing right now, so be patient. But yeah, she's very helpful. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for hosting me, and feel free to reach out. Just as Rajat said, just give me some time to respond. That would be awesome.
And then we have an RC webinar tomorrow. If you're still looking to ace the GMAT, you have the link over there. Do join us tomorrow for that webinar as well. Thank you, and bye-bye, everyone.